Thank you for joining us in our celebration of National Black Child Development Week. I am Denise Stewart, a board member of the Southwest Ohio Association for the Education of Young Children, SWAYSE for short, where I co-chair the Equity Committee. This celebration began about 40 years ago as a program of the National Black Child Development Institute, based in Washington, D.C. Today, NBCDI has several state affiliates, including BCDI Ohio, which is based in the Cleveland area. This is the third year in which SWAYSE has collaborated with BCDI Ohio for this week-long celebration. BCDI Ohio is also collaborating with other Greater Cincinnati organizations and has recently hosted the Fatherhood Table Talks in Cincinnati. Today, we welcome Pamela Bowers, a licensed professional counselor who works with Central Clinic Behavioral Health, where she manages a team of clinicians and prevention specialists who serve children and families through school-based behavioral health services. Pamela is also a consultant with a private practice firm in Cincinnati, Ohio. In her early work with families, Pam provided psychoeducation and support to first-time moms who were at risk of abuse and neglect, focused on prevention work. She is passionate about educating others about mental illness and the effects of trauma, toxic stress, while emphasizing the importance of mental wellness and self-care. We live in a time where the importance of mental health is featured on television and radio commercials, webinars, training sessions, podcasts, books, and magazine articles. Many of the commercials focus on the mental health needs of veterans, the elderly who suffer from dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and substance abusers. There are a few that focus on youth, teenagers, and very few that focus on young children. Pamela, tell us about your experiences working as a provider of mental health services for children.
Yes, thank you, Denise. As you stated, I provided prevention support and treatment services to children and teens and families in residential settings, partial hospital settings, after school, during school, in-home, and outpatient settings for over 30 years.
Okay, very good. What does good mental health look like in children?
Good mental health does not mean to have never experienced negative engagements, such as trauma. Example, abuse, neglect, even racism and discrimination and poverty. Good mental health is being able to recognize the deterioration or lack of coping skills or strategies and making the decision or having the decision made for a child by reaching out for care. It's like acknowledgement is brought to one's attention. Denise, if we think about our response to physical health, right? When we
Yeah,
experience chronic pain or
yeah.
a cough or an ongoing nagging headache or deterioration of our vision or hearing, we seek help and care for this. Mental health is the same.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. Okay. Well, what mental health resources are available for children?
Well, today schools have access to mental health services to students. Either there's a clinician or provider at the school, or the school has a connection to a community or our agency where they can connect families for mental health services. What's also important is that we are consistent with our well child checkups with our pediatrician. That's the first stop. I can't emphasize enough the regimen of going when the newborn is born. They're like within month, they go every month or so often to check their weight and to check their height and make sure they're in this right percentile, for growth and development. At these well child checkups throughout early childhood, throughout the intermediate years, throughout middle school, throughout high school, these are very important because sometimes these are the first stops of where families can receive guidance or maybe share some concerns that they may have. There are several community and private practitioners also in our community where people can connect. One main resource for families is really calling 281 Care to assist with direction on where to start for mental health care.
Okay. I know that, excuse me, the programs that I worked with in the past have partnered with Central Clinic through the Promoting Resilient Children program as part of
Yes.
the Young Child Institute.
Yes, yes, yes. Young Child Institute is a wonderful program that initiated, I want to say about 15 to 20 years ago, maybe. And at the inception of that, they've expanded to other childhood programs that are in our community. But Young Child really works with that parent-child interaction, and people don't realize that that parent bond is the first experience for children about feeling safe, about feeling stable. And if that's disruptive, that can affect the development of children.
You're right. And I remember when that program started, I was at an informational session and they were looking for people to participate in a pilot program.
Mhm.
And I raised both of my hands because at that time I was working in a program that served teenage parents.
Uh-huh.
And you
Yeah.
can imagine all
Yeah.
the issues that a teenager, a
Hmm.
15-year-old who has a baby and she's in high school, trying to finish high
Yes.
school and trying to be a parent. It is very difficult. So our program has continued to partner with the PRC, and
Wonderful. Wonderful.
just it's
Wonderful.
just been it's made such a difference in the lives of the children and their families in our programs.
And that's key. That's key to a
Yes,
healthy person in society.
absolutely. Okay. Can you share with us some of the experiences that can damage mental health? Like you mentioned trauma
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
homelessness and poverty, but what are
Hmm.
some of the other things that you've seen that can damage children's mental health?
Over the years, there's a form or a survey that's been created. You may be aware of it. It's called Adverse Childhood Experience Survey. And this captures lots of experiences that can negatively affect children because of the development of the brain. Um, some examples of some of those traumas could be emotional abuse. We know sexual abuse, physical abuse, substance abuse of a household member, divorce, separation of parents, domestic violence. And keep in mind, when we identify domestic violence as abuse, it's because the child is witnessing and all the emotional and psychological things that go with them, with either they're experiencing it themselves or they're observing it going on in their house. So that's affecting the development of the brain. An incarcerated household member maybe being taken out of the home, residing with a member who has severe depression or a long-term mental illness. That can affect the mental health of children. Data from a 2015 behavior risk factor surveillance system completed in Ohio from the Ohio Department of Health Division of Health Improvement and Wellness also includes racism and discrimination. I said that in the beginning because that's not really captured in ACEs, but that too can affect the development of an individual with feeling safe, feeling okay.
That's true. Yes, I'm familiar with that. I went to a training session on that, and we had to actually complete the questionnaire
Okay.
ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out there were some things, some of my own personal experiences were considered adverse childhood
Yes,
experiences, and that's a really great step towards identifying and then trying to seek the help that's needed. Okay,
absolutely.
right. Okay. What resources are there for parents or caregivers who want help for their children?
Resources for parents start with school. The pediatrician, and I gave you the example of 281 Care if they would like. But there's the National Association of Mental Illness recommends that parents can support their children by basically helping children identify their emotions. And what this could look like is creating an open and accepting environment for them to express themselves. Uh, Culturally, we grew up in different ways of, you're heard and not, you're seen and not heard. Things are changing as far as being able to be authentic and let children be able to express themselves openly. And then being able to listen and validate their emotions. This could look like, I'm sorry that this happened to you. That sounds really tough, or some transitional phrases, or it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel angry. Emotions and behaviors are not the same. They're two different things. Your feelings are valid. Or thank you for telling me. Some other things that parents can do is encourage their children to ask for help. The fear of being perceived as weak might hold them back from seeking help. So we need to make sure we're giving them a okay to ask for help. Um, Discuss the values of self-care and remind children that what they're experiencing, the stigma of even a mental health diagnosis or a mental health struggle, is not their fault. So we need to be present and we need to be able to encourage and empower our children.
Okay. What are some resources for teachers? I know some teachers struggle to understand that
Mm-hmm.
when children act out in the classroom or they're super aggressive or whatever, that it's just a sign of bad parenting.
Mm-hmm.
The parents are
Mm-hmm.
not disciplining their children at home.
So mental health services have been available for students and families within schools for decades. Post-COVID has unveiled an increase in depression and anxiety symptoms, especially among young children and children that are 4 and 5 years old. We are seeing school districts prioritizing now more supports for teachers by working and partnering with mental health agencies to provide more education around strategies to assist students in the classroom who may be struggling, to assist students after school. We have a way to go, but the process has begun. We have to change the narrative of our conversation and stop thinking about what's wrong with you and putting on the hat to say what happened to you. And I got that from Bruce Perry. So that's a wonderful, wonderful informational conference, yeah, with him.
Right, right. Okay. Well, this field is just ever growing as we learn more and more about what impacts children and their families
Hmm.
and the impact that it has on their ability to learn.
Yes.
Okay. What are some of the barriers to seeking and finding help for young children who need mental health services?
Hmm. There are
What are
there are
some of the
lots of
barriers?
there are lots of barriers, especially unique to different family situations, families' understanding of mental health. One of the key things that I've experienced over the years is the funding for prevention services. Psychoeducation is the key to decreasing mental health diagnoses. Unfortunately, funding prevention services costs less for providers, but long-term return on investment is greater. And so we've struggled to identify, and each state is different. And Ohio is in the process of relooking at things. But there are states who have correlated prevention services as the same return rate for providers as treatment services. Another barrier is the stigma of mental illness. Over the years, we are identifying more mental health concerns in younger children, a lot of times resulting in sexual abuse, physical abuse from caregivers, and neglect. Identifying a pre-K through second grader with a mental illness is a lot for a parent to acknowledge, not to mention the stigma of mental health in general. And then sometimes the introspection of what's wrong with me that my child may have this illness, which again is not your fault that this is happening.
Right, right. I agree. I've had that experience where I wanted to refer children for services that I knew that they needed,
Mhm.
but I got so much resistance from the parents
Mhm.
because they exactly what you just said. That means that I'm not a good enough parent or my
Right.
child is not perfect. Something's wrong with my child. And that's a reflection on me. I had one child who was really acting up on a daily basis. She was upset about a lot of things, and
Mhm.
she brought that into our classroom. And our counselor from the Young Child Institute sat down with me and this mom, and we had this discussion about what we needed, what we thought that she needed. And this child was 3 years old, and she said, "Well, can't I just wait until she goes to kindergarten?" And our counselor said, "Why would you want to wait that long?
Mhm. Yes.
She's struggling now. We can
Mhm.
get help for her now." Eventually, that mom came around
Yes.
and pursued the services for the child, which we were, and it just made a huge difference.
Yes,
Just
it
the
does.
services that Young Child Institute was able to provide for her. Yeah,
I'm so glad that's a success story. That's
yeah,
a good
but
success story, but
there's
it wasn't easy, I'm sure.
it was not.
Hmm. It's not always
It,
easy. Yeah.
no, it's not always easy. and for parents to acknowledge that,
Hmm.
or to get over that feeling that there's something wrong with me as a parent,
Exactly. Yes.
that my child is
Getting
not
past that.
perfect.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, what is the impact of the race of the mental health provider on the race of the child and family?
Um, as I mentioned before, in the Ohio Department of Health's Division of Health Improvement and Wellness, Ohioans of color with low income, disabilities even, and the residents of urban or Appalachian counties are more likely to report exposure to two or more of the ACEs. And when we talk about the ACEs, we know that the increase in number of the experiences you have as a child affect the way that you view the world. Black Ohioans, 44%. Ohioans who were of other race or color, were 48%, were more likely to report being exposed to two or more ACEs than white and non-Hispanic Ohio, which was at 34%. So what's important is that our Black and brown families and communities need to be educated on normalizing mental health. Mental health is as equally important as physical health. And I think I see a change, and I know we're coming turning the corner on this. That we're trying to normalize it more. This month is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I know there's so many even churches and are speaking more about mental health and mental wellness and having people come in and that's important for our communities to say, hey, I need to be healthy physically and mentally.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And I think that there's a level of trust that exists when the mental health provider and the person in need of the services are the same.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a level of distrust
Ah, yes.
when they're different. I can remember a single father who was raising his son in our programs many years ago. And the child was really angry, and most of his anger was directed at our female teachers.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so we met with the dad. We learned that his mother had just abandoned him,
Mm,
walked away from him and his dad, never to return. And a lot of his care fell to his grandmother, his father's mother.
okay.
And she was taking care of him for a couple of years, and then she became very ill
Oh.
to the point that she had to spend some time at the Cleveland Clinic for some treatment. And then he's like, okay, my grandma's abandoned me, abandoning me also.
Mm-hmm.
And then grandma died. And
Mm-hmm.
he was just really angry. And so in his mind, every female in his life ends up
Abandoning him.
deserting him,
Mm-hmm.
abandoning him.
Yeah.
And so that made him very angry
Mm-hmm.
towards
Women.
females. And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Mm-hmm.
but we were able to connect that young dad
Yeah.
with a Black male counselor.
Good.
And that was the best thing that could have happened for that family there. Someone who understood where he was coming from, someone that this young man felt that he could trust.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
together they were able to help that child work through his experiences. And by the time he left us to go to kindergarten, he had settled down so much.
Oh,
Still
wonderful.
was getting some counseling, which
Uh-huh.
was needed. I mean, that was something that happened early in his life. It was going to impact him for a while. But that was a success story. It just showed me the
Yes.
importance of whoever the counselor is
Mm-hmm.
to be able to have a good solid
Mm-hmm.
connection with the family that they're serving.
Family. And that was
And
the key point, Denise, that you say, because a lot of times people assume that in this work, you can work with the children, but you cannot work with the children without working with the families. That's key. Some type of trust
right.
relationship you have with that family. Might not be all the time, but you have to have a relationship with the
Yes,
family.
you do. It is
Yeah.
so important. But
Yes.
let's see. Is there anything that we can do to lessen the impact that race has on receiving services? If is there anything that we can do? I can
Um,
share one thing. We
okay.
we had the counselor that we had from the Young Child
Mm-hmm.
Institute, who came to our program once a week, observed the classrooms, and then sat down and met with the teachers and me every day. She was white,
Hmm.
but what was interesting about her was she had adopted a black son.
Okay.
And
Okay. Yeah.
but our teachers were able to trust. She built a real trust with the teachers. They felt like they could talk about anything. She understood. I mean, they looked forward to when she came every week, and they didn't mind giving up their break time during nap time to sit down and talk with her
Yeah.
because of the manner in which she communicated with them. She told
Hmm.
them the things that they were doing well, and then she told them some things that she noticed that maybe they could try something different. And what I know observed from those teachers was that right after she made those suggestions, they were trying to implement those changes in their classroom. It can be done,
Hmm.
but is there anything else that maybe from the side of the mental health providers that could be done, or something else that those of us who are in need of the services can do?
Well, one of the key things is for providers is to keep trying to partnership, keep educating, keep being open to allowing change because the early childhood system is a different system than K-12 and K-12. Um, when I say K-12, kindergarten through 12th grade teachers or educators, they are
Mhm.
taught from a different lens of academia. And so, and then when you partner with that mental health provider, is understanding that we are needed together for the success of this student. The whole reason that we're providing school-based services is so that they can be successful in school and move at the pace they need to move to be productive citizens in society. We need to also, and this is many of us, debunk the thought that children don't experience mental health related issues. And in our Black and brown families, we have not accepted that mental health is an issue. Totally. Research shows that half of mental health illnesses show first signs before the age of 14 years old. 75% begin before the age of 24. So early mental health support can help a child before problems interfere with other developmental needs. Central Clinic provides another program called Connections for Life. Connections for Life deals with the same age group as the Young Child Institute. But at Young Child Institute, these are more parent-child engagement. At CFL, which is Connections for Life, they deal with children who have experienced tremendous amount of trauma that has affected their development in the same age range. And that collaboration of Connected for Life is working with the therapist, they work with the speech pathologist because speech is impaired because of significant trauma, as well as physical. So they work with a PT. So it's, and they work all at the same time. It's a very
Mhm.
unique program at Central Clinic. But we realize that there are children who are severely traumatized, that their development and what we're trying to interfere with is interference of inappropriate development for children. And so when we talk about early childhood mental health support, that's to eliminate or decrease effects on developmental needs.
Very good. I and some you mentioned that most of them start the signs of mental health needs show themselves before the age of 14.
Yes,
Try 3.5 years
yes,
old.
this is true.
We had a child who eventually sought her mother eventually sought care for her, and she was diagnosed with something. I guess it's the preschool version of uh bipolar.
Disruptive mood
What
dysregulation
what was it
disorder,
called? I said that to
DMDD.
you the other day.
It's DMDD, disruptive mood
Right,
dysregulation
right.
disorder. Hmm.
And yes. And it turns out that her grandfather was bipolar.
Hmm. Knowing
And here
family
she
history is
was in
key.
our classroom,
Yeah.
out and yes, yes, it is. Yes,
Hmm.
it is. And but she was eventually able to get assistance also
Very good.
through what is now called Best Point.
Best point.
And
Yes.
she
Uh-huh.
participated in the half day cruise.
Yes.
Yes,
Hmm.
yes.
Hmm.
And so there is hope.
Hmm. There is hope.
Okay.
There is
Is there
hope.
anything that makes you hopeful about the direction of early childhood mental health services, especially for Black children?
Yes, I think that, like I said before, being more, we're getting more comfortable with normalizing mental health needs. of children and of families, because families sometimes need to debunk some of the thoughts and maybe talk about some of their trauma. And I think that the more comfortable we feel about what happened to us helps us to delineate from what's wrong with us. And I think that that's key, is changing the way that we see things and changing the way that we view things. The next generation, I've noticed, Denise, is so less guarded than we are around mental health. They're more likely to normalize. A generation after me and a generation is coming after my children's generation, and speaking openly about their journey and their mental health wellness. So I think that they're in a different place, and I'm hopeful for the next generation because they're more open to being comfortable talking about things that they're struggling with and even normalizing mental health. So I feel good about what's coming next.
Right. I have a daughter who is a clinical social worker, licensed clinical social worker, and she began her career after she completed her master's
Mhm.
as a school social worker at a charter school up
Okay.
in Detroit. And she was able to really develop a connection with those kids who were having trouble sitting in the classroom and without, trying to, just couldn't get through a class session without getting into a conflict with
Hmm.
one of their classmates. But she said that at what she just talked to them, she listened to them, and
Yes.
she gave them what I call tough love.
Hmm.
It got to the point that she said sometimes they would act up in class just so they could get sent
But
to
they can
talk to
talk to
her
her. Yeah.
because they knew that she was somebody who listened and that they could trust what she was telling them that they
Hmm.
needed to do. And so I know she's part of that generation that's behind us.
Yes.
And I'm just hopeful that the future clinicians will have as much success as she had at that particular juncture in her career. So
Absolutely.
I'm hopeful
Absolutely.
because mental health needs are not going away.
Nope. As a matter of fact, I
Do
feel
you
like
have
we're
any
hearing.
closing thoughts? Yeah, go
No,
ahead.
I just want to thank you for this opportunity to focus
Yes,
on early childhood mental health and focus on the importance of mental wellness, um, and just being able to speak about normalizing it. It's very, even within my own family, it's not easy to talk about mental health or concerns for loved
it is
ones,
not.
but it's necessary. And when I initially went to school, Denise, I went to school to be a teacher, and for some reason, I don't know, that I did not follow that path. It was like my mind. I'd studied abnormal psychology, and that was it for me. I was like, no, this is what I want to do. What I want to do at the end, I don't know, but I want to study this. And so it's always been. I enjoy it, talking to people about mental wellness, and just taking care of yourself and normalizing uh, that. Our mental health again is as important as our physical health. And you have to treat it, you have to take care of it, just like you take care of your body.
Absolutely. And that's a message that everyone needs to hear.
Mhm.
And I'm hopeful that the preparation programs at the college level will help the students to receive that message and
Mhm.
to carry it with them wherever they go to work
Absolutely.
because the people in this field are so much needed.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Pamela. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for sharing all of your knowledge with us. And hopefully, people who are listening to this conversation have learned something that will help them in their work with young children and their families.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all for tuning in, and we hope that you tune into the other events we have planned for this week.